I don't believe I am alone in thinking that there's an oversaturation of comic book movies and shows nowadays. Too many as of recent have ranged from painfully mediocre to downright awful. But with those unimpressive movies, I would say that it just makes the really good ones stand out even more, such as the case with The Batman, Across the Spider-Verse, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and now this. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem is yet another breath of fresh air both for comic book and animated films. It's also another example of how new entries in popular long-running IPs can still kick ass, if there's enough effort put into them. The film exudes this energy that really hooked me and had my attention throughout the whole thing, and really just had me in such a good mood. It feels like one of those movies that just exists to make you have a good time. It's really hard to hate it. Of course, I have some issues with it here and there, but I'm way more positive about it than anything else, so I'm mostly going to be gushing about it here in this video. Firstly, the biggest make or break thing for this film, to me, would be the new interpretation of the Turtles, because these ones would be the youngest versions of the characters we have seen thus far. Even though I loved how they acted in the trailers, I was a little skeptical with how the rest of the film would utilize them. But luckily enough, the dynamic they all have with each other became one of my favorite parts of the film. The relationship the brothers had with each other felt really genuine. They all interacted in a way that made them easily likable and relatable, acting like teenagers in a realistic way that made them believable, but not annoying, and instead endearing. Splinter was hilarious, easily getting the best jokes in the film and being played brilliantly by Jackie Chan. The film really gets you to care about him and understand where he's coming from as a single dad just trying to protect his kids. He was a fun new interpretation that I was really into. And while I would say that the rest of the cast isn't as noteworthy as the Turtles or Splinter are, I do think that they are great in their own ways and help serve the story well. No one did a bad job and everyone was likable in their own ways. But obviously the most noticeable thing with this film is the animation, and it is absolutely incredible. You can clearly tell that the movie is taking a ton of inspiration from Spider-Verse, but is still doing its own thing. While I would say that the style of Spider-Verse is as if you took a comic book and brought it into 3D, Mutant Mayhem is more like if you turned a kid's sketchbook into 3D. There's so many neat little details scattered throughout the film, like how anything that produces light has constantly changing scribbles coming off of it, or how most of the humans are just more gross looking than the actual mutants, which was honestly hilarious. And I mean, the character designs alone exude so much personality. Like, you know what kind of person each of the characters are just from the way they look. There's so many neat little things in the animation that I can't even go over it. This film is definitely going to need a second or third viewing to actually see everything that it has to offer. But just to simply put, the animation was extremely good. But it also did the action scenes here a lot of justice. They were a ton of fun to watch. The fluidity and intensity of them was conveyed so well, giving enough time to all four turtles to get small moments to shine in each of the fights, coupled with the great editing and a terrific soundtrack made up of both licensed and orchestrated music, really made each of these fights next level. They were kick-ass. But really, the other massive highlight for me, besides the animation obviously, was the character writing. Everyone here talks like how an actual person would talk. The brothers talk over each other and say dumb stuff like teenagers do. Splinter really came off as a caring father who just doesn't understand his kids and what they want, and everyone overall just acted extremely well with one another. Everyone talked to everyone else like actual people would, and not movie characters reading off of a script. It felt so natural. There was no point throughout the whole film where I didn't believe these characters would say the things they did, and the interactions each of them had with each other really cemented how well they were all handled. It was so good. Now, the film does contain a couple of issues that, while don't ruin the whole thing, I do believe are worth bringing up. Firstly, while the main villain of the film is Superfly, and I do think he's a pretty solid threat and has a ton of personality, there is a secondary villain who actually gets the whole plot going, but unfortunately doesn't do anything besides that. She and her organization kick off the whole movie, but only show back up towards the end, pretty separated from the rest of the plot. When that moment happened, it kind of halted the whole plot, as if the writers forgot about her and had to quickly write her into it in a bit that was rushed, in my opinion. The only time the subplot involving her got interesting was at the mid-credit scene, and while it was incredibly cool setup for the next film, it felt a little underwhelming. Additionally, Superfly, while super charismatic and fun, didn't have the best motivations since he only enacts his evil plans because of 2 bad experiences he has with humans, and he should be able to understand how stupid that reasoning is since he himself is a genius in the film. But he doesn't, which just makes him seem all the more dumb. Throughout the film as well, there were a lot of references to popular stuff nowadays, like TikTok, saying sus, and Attack on Titan, which I was not expecting to hear, and all those small little things felt a little cringy to hear. I didn't feel as though that kind of stuff really needed to be in the film, or fit as naturally as it could have, or should have, I guess, since they were a little distracting when they popped up from time to time. And those small parts really make you think that parts of the film might be dated at some point, but this issue isn't that big of a deal because those are things teenagers do talk about and say, so this critique doesn't really mean that much, and it's just what I thought personally. Finally, while overall pacing of the film was great, being able to utilize its 1 hour and 40-minute runtime very effectively, there are a handful of scenes throughout the movie that just go by a little too fast. A couple of moments I can remember off the top of my head would be a moment when some of the characters have a change of heart, and while the moment was sweet, it did feel as though the characters changed a little too quickly, making it seem somewhat unnatural. And the other moment would be the final battle. While the fight itself goes on for just the right amount of time, it's the falling action afterwards where it feels rushed. Like right after a massive final bout where a ton of stuff gets destroyed and people get hurt, it's just immediately resolved and quickly brushed aside. But afterwards though, the actual resolution is really wholesome and makes up for that somewhat. But really, those are the only major issues I can think of with this film here. Pretty much everything else is just really good. I wouldn't say that Mutant Mayhem is a game-changing next-level film, but it is extremely solid. It's a film that you can tell people poured their hearts and souls into, because the care and effort for this is made immediately clear. I cared for the characters. I loved the interactions they had with each other. I was pumped for the action scenes, and I was gawking at the animation from beginning to end. In a sea of mediocre superhero movies, I'm very happy that this one turned out so incredibly well, and I really cannot wait to see what they do for the sequel, especially with the teaser at the end. But without anything else to say, I give Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem a solid 8 out of 10.